they were in Gary Andrew Edgerton at the home of Noel and Mary Walsh, and we're going to spend the next while talking to Noel and Mary and getting an insight into their life and times over the years. Noel, and thank you very much for welcoming me into your home this evening.
Thank you, Jimmy.
We'll just have a chat. Mary, we'll start with you maybe, and maybe give us an insight into when you were young and where you were born and your family, please.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm a Mayo, and I come from Crossmolina in County Mayo, and I went to school in the local school in Richmond National School, and from there then I went on to Gurtnarabi Convent for 5 years, and then from that on to a rural school in Roscommon, and well, it's still in Mayo, or Claremorris is in County Mayo. Yeah. So anyway, then from that then I went to Cork for a year, and then I came back to Roscommon, and it was there then at that time that we went to the dances, and had a good time there, and I met Noel there. So
we'll save all that for a little bit later.
Okay,
Mary, tell us a bit about your family, your mother and father, and family, brothers and sisters.
Yes, my mother and father they lived on to be fairly old, and I had 2 brothers and 2 sisters. And one brother, my brother next to me died a few years ago, and then my young brother is bought the home place at home, and he's living there with his wife now. I have a sister in Galway, she's married in Galway, and I have another sister in Dublin. And that's about all I know about my...
What was your maiden name, Mary?
Hannah.
Hannah, is that a good Mayo name?
It's a very good name, and my brother always used to say that he was related to Tony Hannah, the Dublin trainer. Yes. You know him, Jim. Yeah. So from that then...
and you said you went to Cork. What brought you to Cork for the year?
Well, I worked with in a hat. I worked for can't even think of the name of them now. Match. Yeah, what was the name of them now? Whiskers, yeah, in Cork. Yeah, I can't even think.
What did they do?
Well, they had a hatchery and poultry and all that. So I did the same work then in Roscommon. When I came here, then I used to sub in the schools around here. Yeah.
And what age were you when you went to Cork?
I was only 20.
And you lived down
20.
there?
And I was there for a year and a half about, and then I came back up to Roscommon. So
that's a great insight into your early years. Maybe Noel, you'll give us a brief rundown on your own.
Very good. Well, I'm a Tipperary man now. Come from the home of hurling near Thurles. I was born in the parish called McCarthy Boards WGA Club. So I went to school, the local national school that is called Howell-Dine. One of my teachers there, she was Mary Condon was her name, and her married name was Mary Quinn. She was the mother of the famous Irish soccer player Niall Quinn. Mary and her family would be good friends of ours, and actually her husband died last week there. But anyway, we went to national school there, and we went to secondary school in the CBS in Thurles. Prior to starting school, unfortunately, my mother died when I was 3.5 years old. There were only 2 of us in the family. My sister Maura was a year old, so that was in the 40s and that, so it was quite a setback. But anyway, we motored on, as the father says.
And what did your father work as?
My father had a small holding of land, and he also used to work in the sugar factory in Thurles during the seasonal campaign, and that was one of the 4 sugar factories in Ireland at that time in Thurles.
Yes.
It came into being in the 1930s, and that gave a lot of employment as well. So
where is your sister now?
My sister's in London, or near London.
Is she married?
She is. So that was more or less.
That's you. And with your father losing your mother so young, it must have been tough for him.
It was in the 40s, Jimmy, and all that, the late 40s. And of course, we had great help from an aunt of mine who didn't marry and that, and she took over the kind of role of
the female role in the house.
Yeah. Role anyway, and looked after us just as a mother would.
Yes. And in school, CBS in Thurles was where your secondary school was. What was that in the 50s?
Yeah, we started there in 57.
Yes.
And of course there in the CPS, apart from the education, hurling was a huge thing and all that.
Absolutely.
And, but it still is. But the Christian Brothers were very good. They were strict. I can't fault any of the ones I met.
Good
In any way.
education.
Yeah, it was. And only for them, nationwide, I think a lot of young people at that time would have got very little education at all.
Absolutely. And you finished up in the CBS in what year?
Finished up in 60 or 61, yeah.
And from there?
From there then, I worked at the beginning in an engineer's office, basically answering phones and things like that. And then moved out of there, and I also worked in the sugar company as well in Thurles during the seasonal times.
Yes.
There was an opportunity of doing long shift work and all that, which the more shift work that you did, the better couple of bobby costs and all that. So then I worked in the building sites as well. And I also went to the local vocational school at night and undertook a number of typewriting courses. Just for pastime in the winter, more so than anything else, but it turned out to be beneficial to me afterwards.
Yes. And as we all know around here, you became a Garda. Tell us just how that came about.
Yeah,
for you.
well, the main reason I joined was it was my number one object. And possibly the reason for that was I admired the local lads who were stationed in Thurles and in the neighbouring villages around, who would have come into the force like, around the Civil War, at the end of the Civil War, and the force was came into being first and that. So they were all men of great integrity. Anyway, I admired them and that, and that was. So we joined in 1964 in September. The college was moved from Dublin to Templemore in March of that year, so we went in September.
And were you the first in Templemore?
No, as I said, it opened in March '64. Our class went in September, which would be 4 or 5 months later than that. So it took off from there.
Give us an insight into how the process of getting into the Guards that time.
Oh yeah, you did an entrance exam. I think it's totally different now, but kind of the exam would have taken half a day, I suppose, or something like that. You had the regular subjects, Irish, English, maths and all that, to do that. That was part one. Then, depending on how you got on there, you were called for interview to Garda headquarters. And then the exam there was, face to face with senior officers and that, and including oral Irish. And so then, after that, I found out after the course that if they decided to accept you, they would do a final test, not with you personally, but with people that they would know in the area to get their opinions as well. Would you be recommended by your neighbours?
Checking your background.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, that was it. So that was where it was then, Jimmy. I don't know how it is now.
And how many would have been in your year entering Templemore?
13 each class. Our class included a well-known Longford man who was now the county chairman of the GAA, Brendan Gilmore. Brendan was on the football team and actually played in the forwards, so was very good at that time as well. So that was him, and my first posting was in Pearson.
How long would you have spent in Templemore?
Oh, 6 months at that time, and just kind of primitive enough in a way. But the training was very strict.
Yes.
Discipline was extremely strict and all that. Well, we thought it was at the time, and looking back on it now, it probably could need it, because there was a big crowd there. The management had to big responsibility and all that.
And would you have lived in Templemore?
Oh yeah. And there was,
and would the bed and board be part of the training, or would that have to be paid by your father?
no, it was part of it. Yeah, we had all the food and all that within the premises. We used to call it a mess hall, and all that there. And there was a bar in the place as well, and for anybody that but it meant you didn't go out to town very much.
And that would have been close to your home.
About 10 miles before the one.
So you got home fairly regular, I'd imagine.
Well, you would get home the weekend, Jimmy, but there was curfew. You had to be in on each night at 11 p.m. And outside the back wall of the Garda College was one of the famous dance halls, the Las Vegas. And we'd be going to bed at 11 o'clock on the Sunday night. And Joe Dolan, Big Tom, Larry Cunningham, and all the lads would be just starting
to stage, yeah.
That was it.
Now tell us, you can look back now, did you ever break your curfew, Noel?
I didn't, Jimmy, because you
was afraid.
wouldn't believe it really, but you could break that and you'd be punishment of dismissal. But that was the
You
outclassing
didn't want to be
at
dismissed.
that time. No, we didn't. But sometimes there would be bits of leniency at maybe bank holiday weekends. But we went in September and came out in the end of February, and that, so it wasn't.
And did all,
that long.
everybody fulfilled their 6 months, and was there?
I think, I think so, yeah. They did. And,
Brendan Gilmore did anyway.
they did indeed, yeah. Brendan was very good. And we had many more as well. The late Jerry McCabe, whom you would have heard about, Jerry was a class ahead of us, and another good footballer there at that time was Pat Griffin. He played for Kerry. They with Nico Dwyer's, with Nico Dwyer and Nico Hannon and that. So he'd have been another well-known man there. So it's all, the first female classes came in around that time as well. So of course now it's different, quite a lot more. That was more or less it.
Right, we'll come back to your Garda career later on, but Mary, we'll come back to you now at this stage, and just, you're back in Roscommon at this stage, and take us from there. You're working in the hatchery.
Well, it's so long ago now that I can hardly remember, but I worked there then for nearly 2 years, I think. And then of course I met Noel, and we got married, and we
don't run over that so quick, please.
Yeah,
Maybe you tell us a bit more about that.
What do you want me to tell you?
Tell us blow by blow, Mary.
It was all very innocent that time, and it was all very, what would I say, well, it was enjoyable, and we had a great old time.
So where did you first meet Noel?
In Fairyland Ballroom, which
where is
in
that?
Roscommon. In Roscommon, I think it's not now, Noel, is it? Yeah. And from that we started meeting one another then. And
was Noel a guard at this stage?
He was the guard. You were in Tarmanbarry. You were stationed in Tarmanbarry, yeah. And I don't think he even had a car that time. No. And when the first car, you bought the first car, it was a small, do you remember the Morris Minor? And we thought it was great that we had a car, and we'd lift to the dances, and sure it got more serious than that then. But anyway, that's it, Jimmy.
So
we got married in 1967.
The Fairyland Ballroom.
Would you believe it was called the Fairyland Ballroom?
And how would you have got in and out to the Fairyland?
Well,
Ballroom?
I was in Diggs and Roscommon, and sometimes we walked if there were a few friends and myself, or we maybe got a taxi, but it wasn't very far. It's only out on the Castlereagh Road.
And what would your weekly salary have been at the time, if you can recall?
I think I was getting about, I think 14 pounds a week. That was more than what you were getting. Yeah.
And how much would it have been into the ballroom?
What was it now?
5 shillings.
Was it 5 shillings?
7 and 6.
7 and 6, I think. Yeah.
And there wouldn't have been a bar or anything there?
No bar. We had our mineral bar and our little packet of biscuits in 3 or 4 biscuits. Do you remember them now? Jersey creams and plain biscuits for, I think, 2p or 3p. And that was our entertainment. But we knew if somebody said, would you like to come for a mineral, or would you like to have well, there was something further on after that. There was a date after that. So if you were asked for the mineral and the biscuits. Yeah.
And can you recall what sort of bands or any famous bands that you might have gone to hear?
Oh, well, sure, we had all the good bands at the time. Was Joe Dolan ever there? No. Yeah. And the Miami and Larry Cunningham and the Capitol. Brendan Boyer. Yeah, we had all the good bands.
And that famous night when you met Noel, can you remember who was playing that night? Or
I do.
Was your head in a spin?
Oh, it was. Brendan Boyer. It was so packed that night, Jimmy, that you couldn't even move. It was that Brendan Boyer was playing. And when Brendan played there in his band, the hall was absolutely, and it was a very big hall. How big would it be now?
It's over about 2,000.
Yeah, yeah, it was really packed. And but then I remember we met that night all right, but then we didn't, oh, I must tell him the story about the landlady's daughter. Yeah. I met Noel that night. I don't know how he got to the dance, but we'll just see, we'll probably meet up again, or we'll see you soon. But anyway, that was in November, and it was a New Year's card you sent me, and hope to see you in Fairyland on Sunday night or whatever it was. But you see, the cards that time, unless you put a stamp to close the letter, you see, it was usually left open, but you had to put a more expensive stamp. I can't remember what the stamp was now, 4pence or whatever it was. But anyway, the landlady's daughter was about 10. And as soon as I came home from work that evening, she said to me, "Oh, Mary, I think there's some Noel going to want to meet you. He wants to meet you on Sunday night." And I was so annoyed with her to open the card, you see, and open the thing. But anyway, I think it started from that, really, yeah.
So she knew before you did?
She knew before I did. Yeah.
And just briefly, communication them days. I know now we can just text or we can ring, or how would you have communicated? Was it by letter?
It was by letter, mostly by letter. Yeah. Well, maybe if you could sneak the odd phone call in at work, maybe, but that would be about it. But like, there were no mobile phones, and very few people had phones in their houses at the time. But it was mostly by letter. And
was it, because of that, would it have been more likely for people in the locality to marry people within their locality, do you think? Was long distance relationships difficult?
Well, I suppose there were. I suppose there were. In my parents' time there were, definitely, because all they had was a bicycle and a sidecar and that. And but I suppose as we got the blow-ins, when we, I was from Mayo and Noel was from Tipperary, and we were living in different parts. Like, we weren't neighbours then, but that's about the only way that you would meet somebody like that.
Yes.
Like, my parents only lived about 8 or 9 miles apart. And it was the same for most families around.
Yeah, I imagine.
It's the same as around here too.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
And Noel, maybe we'll go back to when you came out of Templemore and your first posting as a Garda.
The first posting was above on Pier Street in Dublin, Jimmy. You probably know us beside Trinity. And well, it was the rare old times in Dublin. Every time I hear that song, I think back to that area. Tough enough, like, but compared to now. So that was it. I spent quite a short time there, and then I landed in Carmenbarry. When was it? In March, April '65, I think it was. So I spent over a year there, and maybe a year and a couple of months, and sitting and met during that period of time. And then was the 11th of November, I think it was, 1966. I was transferred to here. I've been here since.
And how many guards were in Edgerstown?
Yeah, at that time, it was Sergeant Dan Keneally and Guard Michael Donoghue. Now, I've seen them all now. They would have been in at the beginning, maybe 1922 or 23, so they were well on in years and that. And I had a young fellow then, my own friend, Sean Feely. Sean, he was here ahead of me, and he was with me here for a few years, and he married Kitty O'Neill from Lisnana. She's his sister of Anne Flood. And so Sean was a county footballer with Roscommon at the time, and he trained the junior and intermediate teams here that won the 2 county finals in the mid-60s. So Sean then, on average, he was transferred to Mullingar. Make a long story short, he ended up a chief superintendent in Naas. And was an excellent member of the force. So that was the personnel who were here at that particular time.
And where was the barracks in the town?
Oh, up where Donald Kyle has it now, the shop in the middle of the street there. History would tell me that there was the RIC barracks, from what the previous generation would tell me. And there was an attempt made, I think, to burn it during the War of Independence. It asked John McGear whether it succeeded or not, but that was where it was. So that was that. And
your first, when you talked to Mary about her salary, it was £14. She reckons she was making more than you, so what would yours have been?
When we were training Jimmy, if I think back, it was £9 a week at the time, and which I suppose on the law of averages, even in the outside world, for the average person, it would have been a lot more for the young person anyway.
Yes.
And that. So that was a big cause.
And where were you living in Edgerstown when you moved here?
In the Master Mars, first of all, I was in residence there for maybe about a year, and then before when we got married, I rented Hughie Clark's house in Lisnagira. Hughie had just left for America, although they retained their ties with here, of course, afterwards as well. But Mary and I, that's where we began.
Started off. Yeah.
Marriage was born there, actually.
Tell me about the proposal now.
Oh!
Well,
Oh,
that's
dear.
Where, when and why?
Oh.
It was in Roscommon anyway, and they have a great,
No, will you leave it at that?
they have a great affection for Roscommon. That was nice.
Oh my God.
We were married in Crossmolina, which was
And who was the priest?
Oh.
the cousin of Mary's, Canon George McHale. Hopefully we'll be going to his 50th anniversary ordination next summer.
Is he still?
Oh, he's still alive,
Oh,
yeah.
he is, yeah.
He's down in Kilglass
He had a horse a bit, but no,
in
he's
Sligo.
a fit
It's
man.
near in his grown.
Active
And
man.
is he still a priest?
He's still a priest, yeah.
And you got married, and talk to us about the reception, or was there a big deal them times, or?
No, we had a reception in Pontoon Bridge
Yeah.
in Mayo. It's near Foxford. And would you believe now that Margaret, our daughter Margaret, lives in Knockmore, and across the lake, the Pontoon Lake, the lake in Pontoon, you can see the hotel right from her window. You can see the hotel right across the lake. So every time I go down, it's closed now. I think for a while. I think there's closed for renovations. But that's where we had our reception, and we had about 50 at the wedding. You know. Yeah. And we had, who was playing music now? We were,
Some of your friends and some
yeah,
of mine.
so, yeah, together. But I know there was an uncle of mine who said that it was the first wedding that he was ever at in a hotel. All the weddings were held in the houses at those times. And they were very good, because I was at some of them, they were real parties, like it was an all day and an all night affair.
Yes.
So it was very good. So, what else
Would you
did
have
you
gone
ask me?
Would you have gone on honeymoon?
Oh, we did.
Tell us about that, or where you went.
Oh, well, we didn't. We went down south and down to Killarney, and I think there was the Rose Tree. The Rose Tree was on at that time, yeah, too. So we went to that, and we travelled all around for about a week or 10 days, and then came back to Edgerstown, and that's beginning of the beginning of the end.
So when Noel was stationed in Edgerstown, and he says to you, Mary, I think we're moving to Edgerstown, did you get very excited about moving to this?
I didn't like it at all when I came first. I missed my friends, and I missed my workers, and I missed everything, and I didn't like Edgerstown. I didn't like it at all. But until I made friends, and until I got used to the place, and Margaret was born the next year, in June of the following year, and when she arrived, then I had something to do. But
did you work from when you came to Edgerstown?
No, I didn't. No.
Yeah. And children came along. You
Children
mentioned
came Margaret
Margaret
first, and then Declan, 2.5 years after that, and then for a year and 14 months, so they were fairly close together, and then John after that. So we had moved into town, into York's house, about 2 years after, was it not? And then
Which house is that, Mary?
that's where Patricia lives now. Patricia Coy lives. We lived in that house for about a year and a half now. God, I can't remember now.
Beside the barracks?
Yeah, they bought that house. It was a very, very big house, about 10 rooms in that house. It's huge. Big garden, a yard at the back. But then we moved out here when we built the house.
And you built this house here?
And we built this house.
Who would have
here.
owned this land?
Rose Lang and Noel owned this, yeah. There's 1.25 acres in it.
Yes.
And we bought it for £300.
£300.
Yeah.
And can you remember how much the house cost to build that?
Cost the house. I don't know whether that was included in the cost of the house. It was about £3,000.
And who would have built it?
Well, we had a number of builders. We had Frank Green, and wasn't Frank on the house now? Paddy Whitney, Peter McNally. So we kind of built it in stages,
Yes.
you know.
It's a fine property and still standing very
Just,
solid.
just about.
Maybe not like the ones they're building now.
Just about, just about.
And you live here, as we'll all know, with the train track running at the back of you. And was it ever an issue for you, or ever a problem? I'd often wonder.
We wouldn't even hear it now. But it did worry me at the beginning, because there was a stile down at the back down there, and it was a right way for Rose Langan had a right away from her house across to the gate here, where she brought milk over here for the creamery, yeah. And that stile was down there, and I was always afraid that the boys would go up on the line. But they were so well warned by Rose Langan that they were afraid their lives to go near it. So they never did, thanks be to God, but it was a danger.
No, maybe if we go back to you and tell us about the kids. Where they are now.
Yeah, well, Margaret Tierney is a national teacher, and she's married in, as Mary said, down near Foxford, Mayo there, and they have 4 children themselves. So she's teaching down in Bohola, and Declan then is in Sligo. He's a chartered accountant by profession, and Ari followed into my own footsteps. He actually outranks me. He's a sergeant in the Guards. He's stationed in Cahir, and he's living near Clonmel. My Rovers GA club would be his club. The only tip man that got a football all-star, Declan Brown, would be a member of that club there. So Warwick has 4 lads as well. The eldest fella, Keane, he's in secondary school at the high school in Clonmel. Would be a bit like Mel's in second year there. And they're all healthy and God and that. So then that's 3 of them, isn't it? Yeah. John is living in Ratharm in Dublin. John is in the media business, and he's into designing websites and that sort of stuff. John's wife is a Tipperary woman, as is Padraig's. I had no say in either of them.
Yeah.
So John, they have 1 child, Patrick, he's a year and pushing 2 now, and expecting another shortly. John's wife's radiographer in Tallaght, so that's the 4 of them.
And do you see plenty of them that will come to visit?
They were here. Declan was here this morning, and they were down to Sligo. He's working in Dublin presently, so he's up and down. That so then John and Sarah, no, John and Patrick, surprised that last Sunday just walked in the door.
I didn't visit. Yeah.
We heard a noise at the back door and didn't know what it was until the 2 of them walked in. And then Tuesday we were down, as I told you, down at a funeral in Tipperary. We stayed over in Everpark. Family's Paris house is only 8 or 9 miles away from there, so we actually heard their marriages on the phone a minute ago there as well, so we're in touch with them all the time. They're all healthy, thank God.
Great stuff. So Mary, you're at home with four small kids, and that couldn't have been easy, I suppose. Very busy time for you.
Well, it was, but I was still here. I was at home with them and looking after them here and picking them up from school and all that, and homework in the evening, and that went on for a good few years. And then I decided that I'd maybe, while I was at home, that I would make use of the house here, and I started doing bed and breakfast. So I was at that for about 20 years or maybe more, and I don't know whether I made much money on it or not, but at least it kept things.
And when you started bed and breakfast, how much would it have been now to stay here?
I think it was £3 each. Yeah, that's what it was at the time. And
a fair few pounds, yeah.
It was hard work. It was hard work. We put on an extension onto the house then, and we had to put in showers and to be registered with Port Fortune.
Yes.
And then after that, it went on then for about 20 years, and the hotels then started to get more popular because they were cheaper. So the B&Bs dwindled down, and I decided to keep it up altogether.
And had you, over the years of entertaining guests in your home, had you any interesting guests or interesting stories that you might recall?
Oh God, I've lots now, but I can't. Can you remember any of the stories now? I can't.
Nothing stands out.
Yeah, we had a lot of people coming back year after year, and it was busy and it was hard work, and the kids helped me a bit, and
enjoyable, I'd imagine.
Enjoyable as well, yeah. But I would like to go back to it again.
And for Edgerstown, I suppose it wouldn't be a tourist destination, so a lot of people be on their way maybe somewhere else.
Yes, exactly. I tell you, Jimmy, it was great before Knock Airport was there, because I got a lot of the travellers going to the west. If they were going to Blacksod or Belmullet, or by the time they left the airport and came here, they were tired, and the first B&B, or the nearest one, it was a halfway house. And they might come at 10 or 11, or sometimes at 12 o'clock at night if the lights weren't out. So I mean, I had that. And then when the airport opened, with what was his name now? Father Horton, was it?
Okay, Monsignor Horton.
Monsignor Horton. He flew into Knock, and they were near their own home places. So that was a disadvantage for me, but I was nearly at the end of doing it at the time anyway.
Yeah.
So that's about all, Jimmy.
Very good. And Noel, would you now, do you at this stage know that you're going to remain permanent in Edgeworthstown?
Well, I would think so, Jimmy, yeah.
And tell us a bit about life as a guard back then. Was there shift work, or was it 9 to 5, or
Well, it wasn't 9 to 5, no, it was nights, day, everything, and then from the late 60s onwards, we used to spend a lot of time on temporary transfer on the border, on that Monaghan, especially Cavan, and we spent a while one time in Black Line, and funny enough, I was in accommodation there in a guest house which was still there. It's now the Maclean restaurant owned by Neville Maguire.
Right.
He wasn't born at that time, his parents were there, but that's where we stayed when we were in Black Line. That, and then other times in Monaghan, and all that sort of stuff and that. So it was a varied sort of a time and everything else. So you had to be totally confidential in your job and everything else, which wasn't a problem for me. Good, bad and different, and we got to know everybody.
One thing I will recall about you as a guard in Edgeworthstown is you were very visible, and you would have been seen on the street, which isn't as much now. Has that changed? Has that changed of policy? Or?
I wouldn't say to a point, Jimmy, I suppose it has. But everybody, including teachers and all that, they're more transient now. Like, so you could have a person here that could be living 30 miles away, and they just drive to work and gone again when they're finished. And the same way with banking staff and all that. They all lived locally in every area in those times and everything else. And then you had a family, and they were going to school, they were going to mass, they were all this sort of stuff, and you were meeting all the local people all the time and everything else. And so you got involved in the community and the GA clubs.
Talk to us about the GAA, maybe, Noel, and your interest in that.
Yeah, well, of course, I grew up in it in Thurles and that, and we're always very proud of that, where it started. But the GAA is for every place. Every parish in Ireland is very important. Now even overseas as well, it's very big. But here, when I came, they had won the junior 66 to 67, and they were moving on from there. And so then in 1970, we had reached the League Cup final, the senior competition, for the first time, and so I think Tom McLaughlin put pressure on me anyway, but he gave them a hand to prepare for the final. So anyway, we undertook a rather rigorous training program, which I implemented from my own time in Trimpermore. A lot of them, I think, didn't know what hit them. They managed to win it. So that was the first senior victory we had in that. And we moved on from there then, and I trained the team in 1973 when they won the under-21. And we were gradually moving up the line at that time with some very good young players and that. And then we had a few narrow defeats in the senior that year, or in 72 or 73, or near thereabouts. Clongish were really the big team. We almost but didn't knock them out, but we were near it. So in 1974 anyway, the board of management, or the executive, decided this was it. So they appointed me the team manager, and had another colleague of mine here at the time, Mick McCauley, and Mick was pretty good as well for physical fitness and that. So we got in with them, and we got them going, and we didn't do that well in the Leader Cup, but in the championship we did. And early on in the year, we played a lot of challenge matches, and with very good teams. Parnells in Dublin, Cavan Gales in Breffni Park, which were really a class team on that. And we played the Guards in Dublin, and one of the senior guards playing at the time was a fellow named Tiggy Harrington. His brother played for Cork in the 56 All-Ireland final, but his nephew now would be well known, Paulie Harrington, the golfer. So anyway, the final challenge match was the one that made us. We played the Downs, and Ned Riley said to me, Noel, he says, you're going up to play the Downs. They don't play challenge matches. Every match is like a funeral. So it was the making of the team.
Great preparation.
The other teams we played were really class players, but the Downs are really
Tough.
hard hitting and all that, so they made us up. And we got to the final then against our neighbours, Arda. And of course, half the two teams were related, and everything else sort of like 74. The Dubs came good in Dublin, like, and all that, so it was like Dublin and Kerry, but it was on an Arda. We pulled it off anyway.
Must have been huge for the parish, and there's an iconic photograph there of the sides of the turf on the grapes being
coming up
Pound Street. How big for this parish was it?
Oh yes, yeah.
Coming up the Pound Hill, and the first port of call that evening, if I remember, with the cup was into Dockery's, because Declan was the captain on the day. And when we went into Dockery's, the first man we met was the late Paddy Keenan from Arda. Paddy had won an All-Ireland Junior medal with Longford when they won the All-Ireland for every year it was in the 30s or something like that. So that was it. So, well, kind of we're forced to be reckoned with half and nonsense.
Absolutely. Mary, when you had an interest, I'm a young woman, you surely had an interest in the GAA, or what other pastimes would you have?
Oh, and I'm sorry, Jimmy, I haven't that much interest in. I did follow Mayo all right, but not that much. I don't know. I know very little about.
And what would you do in your spare time, Mary, over the years?
Pardon?
Dr. Loftus.
Oh, Dr. Loftus. Yeah, Dr. Loftus is there. He was a rep. He's from Crossmalina. Remember Dr. Loftus? And he was our doctor at home. But apart from that, what would we do in our spare time? Well, first of all, we had to help at home with the hay and the turf and things like that when we were young. But as we got older, then we used to go across the line into the hops or this.
But later on, when Noel's off training teams and he's leaving you home,
Oh,
did you ever get a night out in Edgerstown?
Oh yeah. Well, we had we had bingo number 1, yeah. Then I started the ICA here, and we had that for about 10 years. And I can't remember all the outings and all the different things now we did, but we enjoyed that. And we had different classes as well.
Who would have been with you there on the committee of the ICA?
On the ICA, Mrs. McNally, she's Lord Mercy, Mrs. Bobby Farrell, Mrs. Nellie Kane. Who else now? We had about 20, at least 20 anyway.
And you go for trips away, and
we didn't have that many trips away now. I know some of them went to Green on it, all right, but I didn't, because our kids were small here and you were working different shifts, and I found it difficult to get away. And I'm sorry I didn't get to it, but hopefully I'll get to it yet. But as regards, what else do we do for pastimes now?
Well, the social outing, we had the annual dances, GA.
Oh, we had the GA and the guards dance, and the nurses dance, yeah, when we yeah.
And would you take holidays together every year, or try to?
Well, you can talk about that now. Where do we go now?
Well,
we didn't go very far.
We used to go to Ballybunion. Kerry, mobile homes, Jimmy, and we had Noel and Donegal and
Ignatius Gallagher.
Ignatius Gallagher had mobile home, yeah.
And that was generally it. We didn't go far.
Couldn't afford it.
No, Ireland is just as good sometimes. So moving along, since you came to Edgerstown in the mid-60s and now we're in 2016, what's the main changes you've seen in the community and locality?
What I would say, Jimmy, was the advent of the C&D here. That wasn't here when I came, and it proved to be a major benefit to the community. The foresight of the people who actually acquire the land and built the C&D and all that, like Albert Reynolds, Gregory York, the land, he had the land, and Jimmy Kyle had an input into it, and Richie Chooch and Mashy Lyons in Longford. See, the C&D was detailed for Longford, and I think there were some objections by the locals where the venue might be located. So anyway, it came here, and we're all very grateful that it did, because it has proven a great benefit to the community. Apart from the people who work there on a permanent basis, you have the seasonal work for young people. And some of our own work there in holiday season and all that. And apart from the few bob they got out of it, it gave them an understanding of what work was all about and everything else. The other building then that came in, I think it's 1981, 82, with the Paul and Vincent's. That's a reasonably big business as well. So those businesses were not here at the time it came. So the people who got behind those must take a lot of credit for that. Albert Reynolds, as a TD, employing about 400 people. You'd say now, how many TDs in the Dáil at the moment can say they're employing 400 people?
Not too many.
Well, I hope they are, but it's doubtful enough. So that end of it, the closure of the mart was another, what would you say, hazard, for want of a better word, and also the closing of the Bank of Ireland. They would be downsized.
Yes.
Right, so, but that's the main things that I can see.
Mary, we see so much new housing has come in since the Celtic Tiger in the past 10 years. And do you think that has benefited our locality, all this new people in the area?
Well, I would hope so. I know the schools, there's quite a number of different nationalities living there, good people, and then we have, I suppose we have the train station is so near to the town, and it's an asset too for them, you know, travelling up and down to Dublin. But I still like Edgeworthstown, who were just a little smaller town, a smaller place. But
to call it progress.
They call it progress, and I just don't know whether it is or not. Time will tell.
You have how many 10, is it?
We
9
have,
grandchildren?
yeah, we have the photos up there now. Park has 4 boys, Margaret has 3 boys and 1 girl. John has all boys, apart from poor Laura. John, I hope maybe the next one might be a girl.
So 9 altogether.
Yeah, 9 and 1 on the way.
Oh, on the way, very good. So from their point of view growing up, the oldest is what, 12 or 13?
14, yeah.
14. What do you see for them? Do you worry about their future or the changes that...
I do. I worry about them even now for Cian. He's 14 and a half and he started going to discos, and I do remember when ours were going to different discos and places. Well, we didn't really worry that much at that time. Just by the time that John started going to out to discos and out late at night, and different things happening in Longford, and accidents and things like that, I would think about them, but you can't keep thinking forever. I mean, we had there's enough to worry about our own. It's worry about grandchildren, but I would think about them.
What advice would you give to young people growing up, based on your life experiences?
Well, honestly, I don't know, because it's a different lifestyle altogether, and I would just ask them to be careful and take care, and especially with pubs and that, be careful with drinking and drugs, and watch out that way. That's about all I can think of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Noel, if you look back in your life now, is there any one standout moment in your life, or both of your lives together, that you would say your proudest moment, or a standout moment?
I would say the day I got married anyway.
Oh,
excellent answer.
That's the number one.
God help us.
There was 2 more, I think, as I said to you, Jimmy, about the winning the championship in '74, and then in 2001 the local people here nominated me as a nominee for Longford Man of the Year, and I don't know how they came up with that, but they obviously thought that anyway.
Well,
I was very happy with that, and a lot of other good people around as well. And in getting back to my occupation, one of the sad things that I always remember was dealing with bad traffic accidents.
Yeah.
And breaking bad news, Jimmy, that is a very difficult job to do and everything else. But you can never get used to it, but it has to be done like that. And you try to be there for people as best you can when these things happen. And thank God, Grace, recently, in recent times, I'm fortunate enough here at the moment, so we keep that.
We'll have to be careful.
Going.
So, as I say, we're near the end of our interview, so we're 100 years after 1916, and
Yeah.
do you think the ideals of those guys back then have been realised, or are we?
I leave that to you, Noel. You're the history man, yeah.
There's a good bit done, Jimmy, all right. In fairness now, they're being decried at the moment to a certain extent, but we have come on a good way. The country is highly respected throughout the world. Ireland is at the minute. A good bit more to do. The housing situation of the homeless, which we read about in recent days, where children and all that have no homes and all that, and unfortunately, children like that, as they grow up, they have no place to look back to, see where they came from, and everything else. And that may have demoralising effect on them. And it could mean that a certain percentage of them would end up in the wrong place. And so housing needs to be tackled badly and all that. And I hope now, after the election, that the incoming government can't be done overnight, but
Make it a
They
priority.
do more, yeah.
So before we finish, is there anything you would like to add, or any stories we may have missed out, or
I think there's enough said now.
maybe too much,
I
Mary?
think there's too much said, yeah.
No one, if you anything.
well, I would encourage the youth, like, for education. We have ample opportunities now for education, which was not there in our time. The colleges everywhere. So there's something for everybody. Education doesn't come cheap either, but still. And there's one man that's totally overlooked with it. The current generation would never have heard of him. Donegal O'Malley. He was the Minister of Education in the 60s. He introduced the free second level education, which helped quite a lot and gave it a springboard to the next generation to follow on after it. And so education and the youth, they respect their elders and all that, and they'll be all the better for it when they're reach maturity themselves.
Well, I'm all the better for having the chat with you, and thank you very much, Mary and Noel.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank
Thanks a
you,
million.
Jimmy.
He certainly enjoyed it. And you know, Jimmy, this, he got turned off later on now, but